So today's video is a little different from what I usually upload on this channel. I'm interviewing Doug Cunnington from nichesiteproject.com. He's been a YouTuber for a long time, and he's also been building niche sites for a long time. In this video, we talk about how to scale a team of content writers and how to outsource content in general. I hope you enjoy it. Today I have with me Doug Cunnington, and I'm really happy to have you on board.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks a lot for having me on.
Sure. So why don't you do like a quick introduction? I'm sure a lot of the viewers here already know who you are, but yeah, just tell a little bit about who you are and your background and so on.
Sure. So I blog over at Niche Site Project, and I have a YouTube channel and a podcast. Generally, I talk about affiliate marketing and some SEO, a little productivity and project management as well. And I got into this affiliate marketing world and make money online after hearing the Smart Passive Income podcast back in 2013. And I got obsessed, really got into it. So I had a few sites on the side as I was working a project management software job for a while. And then I got laid off in 2015. And then since then I've been working on affiliate sites and niche site project. I have a course as well. So I kind of dabble in all this sort of online stuff. And I love working for myself at this point.
Really cool. So how many sites are you running right now?
So I keep it pretty lean in general compared to some folks that I know. So I have about 4 or 5 sites. Some of them I'm not really active on improving or doing anything, but I have a few out there.
Okay, cool. So I also wanted to ask you, how's the last year been for you? With Google updates, new sites, are there some new things you're focusing on or shifts in your business?
Sure. So Google updates have been, coming out, seems like more often, and they're usually like broad, sort of really hard to detect, where, back in the day, it was like thin content, like low quality, duplicate content, or anchor text, pretty simple, straightforward stuff with Panda and Penguin. So I've had some impacts, and generally, because I have a few sites and they are across different topics and niches and stuff like that. Some go up and some go down. And I have no real handle on what's going on exactly. Generally, the content's pretty good, but not the best out there. One thing that I think sort of buffers my sites is I use the keyword golden ratio, which in general is just long tail, really long tail traffic, very low search volume. So any one post gets, a minor, small percentage. And even the posts that get the most traffic, it's pretty minor. So if any of those take a little bit of a hit, it's kind of it's buffered. It's a little bit muted compared to a lot of sites I know. Maybe the top 20% of the posts get 80% of the traffic, typical 80-20 situation. But my sites tend to have a really long tail. So
I'm kind of in the same boat there. I also go for content with really low competition. So that's just cool to hear.
Yeah. And I hear from friends that have, a site that maybe drops in traffic by like 40%. And I'm like, oh man, that's like obviously dramatic and very impactful. So, and then, here when we're recording this right now, it's like March of 2020. So coronavirus stuff is going on. And I know some people, traffic has dropped dramatically.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about this. So just continue. Yeah.
So traffic has dropped dramatically. And then depending on what niche you're in, you may get more traffic. So a couple of my sites have more traffic, like 10 to 25%, and some have dropped. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are buying a ton of stuff, but some of them I'm like, oh, wow, that this site has definitely picked up. And just to give people, I usually don't talk about my site specifically, but just imagine things that people do at home. People are now sort of in a lockdown situation. They're at home, they have more time, they don't have to commute. They may be picking up side hustles too, right? I mean, a lot of people are losing their jobs and
totally,
or some sort of a furlough situation. So there are more people probably online doing things, but depending on what your topic is, they may not be going to your site at all. So what about you? What have you seen?
Yeah, it seems like it's a total gamble. So I have a few more sites than you, I think across 7 or 8 sites. I just digged into it because another friend asked me specifically about it. I didn't know. I don't track all my sites that closely. Some are very passive, but I found that one site was actually going up quite a bit, like 30 or 40%. So first I didn't really get why, and I started digging a bit into it, but then I figured it's because it's sort of this hobby site that you can do alone. So you don't need to be around like 10 people. So if you spend a lot of time alone, you can totally, you know, do your hobby right there when you're home in a quarantine, or just sitting at home. So that kind of makes sense. And then I have another site that also went up, but generally I'd say that my traffic went down maybe 15%. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think, overall, if you look at the sheer numbers, it's probably down some, but I was
yeah,
surprised. And also it depends on what span of time you're looking and comparing to. So if I look back like this week versus 2 weeks ago, it's up a ton. But if I
yeah,
smooth it out and look at like this year versus last year, just for a
yeah,
month, then it removes some of the, I wouldn't call it seasonality, but the news cycle of, 1 to 2 weeks,
yeah,
so.
totally. Yeah, because that's also the thing with when something like the coronavirus happens, right? Everybody's on the news sites all day long, right? So
Yep.
that can also be it. So everybody loses a little bit, and I think over time people will also lose some interest, and it's not gonna stay forever. It's a temporary thing. It's a bump for
Yep.
all of us. Yeah. Okay, well, so today I also had like a main topic for this conversation. I just wanted to touch base with you and get introduced to the audience here. But I wanted to talk today also about outsourcing content, because I know it's something that both you and I do, and I think that's something that a lot of people out there have a great interest in. So when did you start outsourcing content?
When I first started, I wrote all of the content myself. Even so, I knew that I wanted to outsource a little bit. So it was pretty quick. I would say within 3 months or so, I started to outsource just a little bit because I knew that it would be a valuable thing to do and gain those skills. And in fact, I teach people, you probably should, even if you plan on doing all the writing yourself, start outsourcing like 10% or so. That way it's low risk. You can learn the mechanics of hiring someone, working with them, giving them instructions, and sort of hone your process versus,
Mm,
the alternative. Let's say you have an unlimited budget and you can outsource to as many people as you want. You may think, hey, I'm going to hire 15 writers and they're going to write all day and I'm going to get, 10,000 words per day or some kind of huge number. And turns out it's really hard to manage people. So
yeah.
you can't just go from 0 to 10 immediately. And if you can build your way up and have a low risk environment,
Hmm.
that's the best way to do it because, hey, you're only outsourcing 10% and you can sort of hone your process and refine it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It has also been like a gradual process for me. I think I started like around a little less than 2 years ago with just one or two writers writing a little bit of content, and now it's a bigger team, and I seem to be scaling up more and more.
Mhm.
So, are you also scaling up? Are you at a constant level of outsourcing?
No. So I'm not doing either of those things usually. So a lot of times what I do is like sprints of work. I can spawn up a team. I can have, a couple writers, like you said, have one or two, slowly build up the team as they are getting up to speed. And then
Mm,
I may have, 10 to 15 writers writing, and I'll do the sprint of work, say for 5 months, for example, and I'll have a lot of content written and just really focusing on that. And then I'll taper it down. So that's typically the way I've worked over the past few years. And currently, I guess I lied just a little bit. I am not necessarily like getting ready to spawn up a huge team, but I have one writer writing a couple articles for me for a site that I just acquired in the last quarter or so. And, I'm doing like one article per week, or she is doing one article per week. And then
okay.
there's just a little bit going on, but, I'm not the sort of person that feels like you have to publish constantly, like have a regular schedule or anything like that. And I haven't found it to be like a issue at all for traffic or rankings or
Yeah.
anything like that.
No,
So,
me neither.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
also have some sites that sit very, very passively. I just created a bunch of content like 3, 4 years ago and never touched it again. No, I basically logged in like last week for the first time in a year. I had to update everything, and
Yeah.
the traffic is kind of constant. So I also found it's not a lot of correlation between publishing and traffic. It's a different animal than YouTube for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. YouTube is like a machine that, I mean, you actually, I mean, you could publish a new video and it can start ranking. And if it's doing well, I mean, you could overtake, and maybe it's how it was, maybe, back in the day. You've been doing this longer than me, but back in the day on Google, I think maybe there was a little more traction. I don't know. Like, was it like that way back?
No, I think Google
No.
has also always been like super slow. Well,
Okay.
when we're talking the tech side of Google, I know YouTube is also
Yeah.
Google, right? But yeah, so my YouTube channel here is quite new, but as you know, I've been doing YouTube for a while with my wife on our Go Downsize channel. So we definitely saw some really, really quick rises, like many years ago, where we did like a few videos that'll like get 100,000 page views in no time. So, but that's also different than doing online marketing videos. It's a more
Yeah.
dense space, of course.
Yeah.
Cool. So what does the process look like for you? I mean, from you get the idea of what to write until you have that article published. How many middlemen are there?
So I'll come up with the keywords, right? I kind of do keyword research fairly quickly. I know what I'm looking for in general and the keywords that are going to convert pretty well. So I'll have a quick look, maybe do a little competition research, and then I don't need to come up with a list of like 50. I only need maybe like 4 at a time, and that's good for a month at the state that I'm doing this right now. And even if I wanted to do, if I wanted to publish a whole lot more, I maybe would only need to find like, let's say 30 different keywords per month, which is really not that many. It would
Mm,
probably take
yeah.
me about an hour. So I'll find the keywords because I like to have a lean team overall. I don't have any desire to have a big ongoing team. And I will just send over the headlines to my writer. I've worked with her in the past, so she kind of knows the drill, but I have a template. It's pretty modular where you have a bit of a buying guide. You have like mini reviews, and you talk about the features that someone wants or what they need to look for and think about. If they're choosing a product, you put that in the buying guide. And then for the mini reviews, I usually keep it pretty tight. We're talking 300 to maybe 600 words most of the time. And I like just let the writer know to talk about the features that each one of the products has, right?
Mm,
So they could compare, and it's sort of a cohesive way to pick a product, which is the goal for these affiliate type articles. So once that is done, the writer will get it over to me, and I just take a quick look, sometimes, not always, and then I'll get it over to my VA, who does editing and content management. So she's a writer by trade, but she serves as my executive assistant. So she helps me with all sorts of things, but she knows how to write well and edit. So she'll edit it. I taught her how to do the formatting and that sort of thing, which is fairly straightforward. And then, maybe I'll tweak it just a little bit. I'll peruse it just to make sure the links look how they
mm,
should. And then I let her publish it. So as you're training people, I like to have a little back and forth and dialogue. One thing I want to emphasize for people that haven't outsourced much, if you just tell them, hey, edit it and format it, and you don't give them
mm,
any instructions, and they come back to you and you're like, this is a terrible VA. They did a bad job. They didn't know what to do. It's always your fault. You have
yeah.
no one
Yeah.
else to blame than
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. It's so different what people mean when they say edit this, right?
Yeah. And if you don't outline those step-by-step processes, then
Yeah.
they don't know what to do. Now, there's a set of freelancers that literally don't care. They're lazy, and they don't follow directions. They
Mm,
turn in things late. I'm not talking about them. Right. So most people want to try to do a good job. So
yeah.
assuming that they want to do a good job, if you give
Yeah.
them the right information, they should do a pretty good job.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah.
So I guess the total number of people, including myself, is 3. So 3 people. And
Okay.
if I were to scale it up, usually what happens, there's more writers. So
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
maybe end up with, I don't know, 6 more writers to work with one content editor. And that way the content manager and editor can process all of the content from the 6 writers, or however big that pod is. I call them pods
Yeah.
sometimes. So,
Yeah.
And that's
Okay.
super similar to what you do, right?
Yeah, it's kind of similar. I also have like a full-time editor, and when she's not editing, she will write. I mean, if there's not too much output from the other writers, she was one of my best writers, and then I sort of promoted her to become an editor. So
Perfect.
all the other writers are handling it over to her. Then she'll publish it. So many times I'll not even see the content because I trust her so much, and I think she had helped me like publish over like many hundreds articles by now. So it has been a lot of training and steps so far to get to that point. Definitely.
Fantastic. And one thing I can add too is I mentioned the process and make sure you get the step-by-step details. That's maybe one of my superpowers. That's kind of what I did at my previous job. So as a project manager, you have to do a lot of different things, and that means different things to different
Hmm.
organizations. But a lot of times I was onboarding, putting together an onboarding document that is basically a set of procedures, and it may be like outlined in a certain way. And then if I was working with a specific project team, they may not know how to use a tool. So I would have to create a job aid, do the step by step. And once you create it, that's maybe 50% done. The other part is to iterate and make sure that you are updating it based on feedback from the users. So in this case, I put
Yeah.
together a job aid for my content manager and editor. Here's, 4 pages, 35 steps. It's broken out so it's not overwhelming.
Hmm.
And I just asked for feedback for every content manager that I worked with. Let me know if there's anything unclear, leave comments, just tell me I want to improve this document. And sometimes actually all of their comments ended up being integrated into it eventually. At that point, you end up with kind of a bulletproof process there because you end up with a refined, distilled, very clear, and you have a lot of different people with different skills giving you feedback on it. So, and I have like job aids like that, and I didn't check with you beforehand, but I'm happy to give that out. I give away a lot of templates, so I could hook you up with a link to get that out to folks.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool. Along the same lines, I'm also working with like templates for different types of articles that also has been refined. When I get articles back, I see, okay, that didn't follow it. So apparently I wasn't too clear in those details, because as you say, good writers will do what you tell them to. Cool. So where do you go to get writers? Do you get new writers on board?
I go to Upwork. So
Okay.
pretty boring answer, but yeah, I go to Upwork, and
Yeah.
there's a big pool of writers there. There's new folks all the time, and I typically aim for like newer writers in general. You can get overqualified people at good rates. And one thing that I always do is provide very thorough instructions and very thorough reviews, or yeah, is that what you call it in Upwork? You give their feedback, right? So you give them
Yeah.
feedback,
Feedback reviews. Yeah.
and that's what they want, right? They need to
Yeah.
get feedback as a new freelancer. They want to be hired. They want to up their rates. They want to grow, hopefully, as a freelancer and
Yeah.
be able to earn more money. So if you could help them by giving them good, longer reviews, then that's fantastic. The other thing that I do is I'll often do trial jobs or smaller gigs. So I know for whatever reason, people maybe heard me say, yeah, I'm publishing, 50 articles a month, blah, blah, blah. And they will go out and find a writer, and then they'll create a huge contract for them, a
Hmm.
job for them where it's, 50 articles,
Yeah.
but they are not hungry after they do the first 10.
Yeah.
You're going to start turning things in a little late. Maybe the work isn't going to be as good. So I keep smaller contracts, maybe a maximum of like 5 or
Yeah.
6
Yeah.
articles per gig. And
Yeah.
that way, number one, you can give them more feedback, and they want feedback. And I point it out, right? You got to let them know, because if they're new to the
Uh-huh.
platform, they may not realize it. So sometimes when I'm first hiring them, I will go through like 1 or 2 articles per gig for maybe like 5, just to make sure they hit deadlines. We're
Hmm.
working well together, and they get the benefit of getting more reviews, even though they're just working with me. So again, I let them know to make sure they realize that this extra work, because it's extra work to do that admin stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it works really well.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet also for a writer, it can seem like a whole mountain of work if you just give them like 50 articles, just to get chugging along on 50 articles. I mean, giving them a little milestone at a time, I think that just works great. So can I ask you how much you pay your writers? Do you have like a flat fee, or is it independent for each writer?
So typically it's a flat fee. That's usually just how I like to structure the writing. And it varies from about maybe like close to $20 per thousand words up to maybe about 40, depending on like what the topics are, if I've worked with them before and that sort of thing. The
Hmm.
particular writer I was mentioning earlier, I've worked with her for a few years and she does a really good job, always hits the deadlines. I don't need to edit at all. My editor basically doesn't need to edit either. So I'm paying more for her, but it's because we've had a relationship and she
Hmm.
knows exactly what to do. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, in that sort of range.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It is definitely a keeper.
Yeah.
Cool. So do you do anything to track the performance of each article? Like, let's say, in terms of rankings, or do you do it per article, per site, per writer? Do you have any processes for that?
It's pretty loose. So generally, no, but I do track the rankings for the specific keywords that I identified at the beginning, which gives me some insight. So usually I'll want to see those, pop up and rank somewhere. And most of the time I'm just tracking to make sure there's not some Google update, an event where things have dropped.
Hmm.
So, or maybe they move up, but typically, I'm looking for a drop. If it goes up, I'm like, oh, great, I see more traffic. Fantastic. So I do have those reports. I use, there's many tools out there, but I use a tool that allows you to put put together a report that's emailed to you. So I just get it in my email. I can take a quick look and I know, hey, things are generally fine today. Additionally, I do have a look at Google Analytics and the Search Console. Nothing
Yeah.
fancy. I don't have it like event tracking or anything detailed in place, but on a like per page basis, I have kind of an understanding. So, for example, back I don't know, like a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I'm just going to take a look at one of these sites, and traffic had dropped because of all the current events and news
Yeah.
stories. However, I'm not 100% sure what happened. I took a look and I saw like a traffic spike. I was like, that's kind of weird. So I started to dial it down. This is in Google Analytics, by the way. So I started to dial down and I saw, oh wow, one post for whatever reason either got shared. Maybe people are searching for that term more, but traffic went up by, I don't know, 100%. It doubled basically.
Okay.
So it
Wow.
doubled. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. And that said, I typically, once I find an anomaly like that, I'll dive down and have a look like, where's the traffic coming from? Is it organic search? Is it Pinterest? Is it something else? And as I am finishing up this little anecdote, I realize I didn't do that. So I don't know where the traffic came from.
Okay. Yeah. 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 There's all these things that you should do, and then there's reality, right?
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, the thing is, it would be interesting, but basically it happened naturally. So there's
Yeah.
no action that I probably can take in the short term that, knowing that information
Yeah.
is not going to change my actions. Now,
Yeah.
after the fact, in maybe a few more weeks when I take a look, if it's sustained, well, then maybe I need to look and do investigation on why it happened. But in general, it's like, okay, it's cool to know, but it's not going to change any of my actions over the next 2 weeks.
Really cool. It's funny you mentioned that, because that's something that I try to think of when I'm diving into analytics or Search Console or any other data. I try to, because it can take a lot of time to dig into data, especially if you want to see it per article basis. So just as you said, I'm trying to think like, is there any possible action I would take? If it's outcome X or Y or Z, oh, wouldn't I change anything? Regardless of what I find. And if I tell myself, I'm probably not going to do anything, it's just interesting to see these numbers, then I stop what I'm doing.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, this is going deeper, but I typically don't watch the news or pay attention to current events because my day to day, funny enough, is basically like the quarantine lifestyle. Apparently, I'm hearing that from a lot of folks like you and I that work from home. There's just more people out walking around in the parks than normal. And usually I could go to a park and I'm the only one out there with my dog. But now
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a bunch more people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really pay attention to too many things because my day to day is not going to be changed by it.
Yes, that's exactly right. Okay, cool. So also, I have a few questions left. Do you still write yourself, or is everything outsourced for you at this point?
So I write a very, very tiny amount. I would say if it just happens to be like a section that I'm editing and I'm like, oh, I'll put in a sentence or two here to clean it up. So I wouldn't really count that. So I don't write for any of my sites at this point, other than Niche Site Project, where I
Yeah.
do a lot more writing. I mean, that's my internet marketing blog. I have been experimenting with just hiring some of my students who can write really well. So, I mean, some of them are like pro writers, right? Like that's what they do. And the other reason, and I know this is probably not the topic that you were aiming at, but they have a fresh take on certain topics where if I've just been doing, the same sort of thing for many years and it's kind of working, but they're coming at it with different influences, a different angle, and maybe they are still writing, for example, on their sites. So they may be able to bring cooler or more motivating information to the table than me writing about the same thing over and over again. So I have experimented hiring writers, and I mention it, when someone does post on Niche Site Project for me, I'm like, hey, this is one of my students or whatever. And typically I'm hiring my students, and I do pay them much more. By the way, I pay them much more than I pay the writers from Upwork for affiliate content. So
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now we've talked a lot about outsourcing content. I also wanted to ask you, Hen, if you wanted to elaborate on what else you are outsourcing in your business at this point.
Okay. So I try to keep things like to a minimum as far as a big team. One of the stressful things, and I don't know if you run into this, but like if you do have the big team of writers, like you have to keep them busy or they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So there's always like you have to keep these folks employed or they're gone and you spend all this time
Yeah.
training and working with them. So I
Yeah.
don't want that stress. So usually I will keep it as lean as I can, spawn up the teams, and then spawn them down. That said, I have a video editor who works with me. She's been working with me for a couple of years. So once I started pushing hard on YouTube, editing is not a strong area for me. I enjoy it a ton, but it takes a long time. And I never put the time in to develop the proper skills and learn how to use the software better. So I have an editor, and then I have two VAs. One helps me with kind of support for my course and some of the admin stuff on that side. And I have an executive assistant, a virtual assistant, and she helps edit occasionally. I'm trying to teach her and keep her motivated by getting her
Uh-huh.
to do other stuff because it can get boring to do the same thing over and over again. So she helps
Yeah.
me with email management. She helps me with editing content. She can do all the admin stuff on the YouTube side. So you probably know like all the tags and description and
Yeah.
thumbnails and all the
Yeah.
little things.
Yeah. It can take a lot of time. A lot of time.
And and I like doing some of it, and it
Yeah.
like the thumbnails, I actually enjoy putting those together. And once you get sort of not that my thumbnails are great, but I'm putting out enough videos where I can play around with them a little bit, and I'll do maybe one thumbnail every 2 weeks, something like that. And then she's doing most of the rest of them. So she's sort of a catch-all. And if I realize that I'm doing some activity that I don't need to do and someone else can do it, then I'll get my um, EA to do it basically. And then, I got these podcasts going out too, but I typically, I keep the editing really light, and then I will
Hmm.
just do the editing myself just in like GarageBand. So that potentially could be a thing where I outsource it. And, I've had people tell me, oh yeah, you could definitely go and hire a service or an individual, and they're like, yeah, it's just, $60 per episode, which, hey, that could be a bargain, but I'm not running ads. I don't have a ton of listeners. And when I'm doing 2 episodes per week, so when you add that up,
Yeah.
that's a lot of money to just, push to, I mean, it doesn't take that long to do a podcast episode for me. And some of them, if I just record right into my recorder and don't edit it, then I can just master it, upload it, and it takes like maybe 5 minutes longer than the actual episode.
Wow.
Yeah, show notes could be a little bit better, but in the long run, you know what? I am not sure that having like robust show notes and maybe the full transcript, some people are like, oh, do the full transcript. It's great for SEO and blah, blah, blah. I'm not convinced, because I've tried a couple here and there. And unless you have a kick-ass headline where you are aiming for like keywords and that sort of thing, I don't know that it pans out. Now, I could be totally wrong on that, but if you're getting a transcript of audio, do you know how much it costs?
No.
It's about $1 a minute. So if I'm putting out, say, 120 minutes per week for an hour-long episode, well, that adds up to a lot. Yeah. And then you put that on top of the editing, all of a sudden, instead of essentially a free thing to push out like a podcast, not quite free, but it's pretty cheap to host a podcast out there.
Yeah.
You end up, you could end up at like $1,000 a month to put out a podcast just on the services and stuff. So anyway, I keep it lean. I do a lot myself because I don't want to work with a lot of people.
Yeah, I've also been thinking about starting a podcast. I'm going to do it at some point, but now I'm just focused on getting my YouTube channel up to speed. But so it's definitely interesting also to hear about your process there with the podcast.
Yeah. And, if you're doing some interviews like this, you have the audio already, man. So
that's right.
Yeah. But you do have the audio right there. I'm all about repurposing the same content and meeting people where they want to get it. So.
Yeah, totally. It makes a lot of sense when you do interviews like this, which I'm definitely going to do more of. So, and that was also like one of the reasons I heard some other guys telling that they will put it on all channels. And actually, when I was on your channel recently, a friend called me up and said, I just heard you on this podcast. Like a podcast? What? And then, of course, he was listening to you and I talking in a car to work. So that was pretty cool. I didn't know at the time that I was also on your podcast. So. It's just a great idea, I think, to repurpose content like that, because time is definitely the limited resource, and we can't outsource ourselves, right? Being on camera on the YouTube channel, that's something you can never outsource. So being able to use it on different channels, that's just a great idea.
Yep. And another funny thing is I will republish, and I don't know how great this is overall, but I'll republish the audio from the podcast on YouTube with just a thumbnail. Some people use YouTube as a podcast player. It's weird, but there's a handful of people that they'll watch this interview, right? And then they would also listen to it both on YouTube. So, and you probably have seen there's a huge volume of videos that I push out, and that's why it's like more than one per day at this point in time.
Yeah, you have a ton of videos, man. That's cool.
Yeah, it's all the same content, just republished. But there's so much that there's very few people that catch it the first time around. So I feel I'm not 100% sure, but I won't know until, years later. Did this actually pay off, or were people just ignoring the videos?
Yeah, but you're making it available to people. I also see people put the podcast on Spotify and other places, just to make it available where people are. If you're in your car and you usually listen to YouTube, maybe that's exactly when it pops up, right? And you have that chance to hit this. So, okay, well, I'm at the end of my questions for you. It's been really, really cool having you on, Doug. It's been a pleasure, and always great talking to you. Is there anything else you think we should touch upon, or?
Sure. I'll just mention a couple things. You didn't ask specifically, but I know a lot of times there's people who are like, I was thinking of doing this thing, whatever the thing is, whether it's like drop shipping, affiliate marketing, starting a blog that they'll put display ads on, or YouTube channel, podcast, whatever. Just start something. Don't start everything. You can do everything eventually, but just pick a thing, outline some goals, and at least follow through with what you want to do. And even if it's not successful, which it's probably not going to be, right? It's probably not going to be
Yeah.
successful, but
Yeah.
you'll have a different perspective and point of view once you finish it. So I would say, however long you want to do it, a 1 quarter, you could do a 6-month sort of project, and just work on it. Start the thing that you're thinking of doing. You'll always be better off and have better experiences. Maybe expand the network that you're in, right? So you and I are talking now because you have a YouTube channel, and I've met a number of people that I'm in touch with almost on a daily basis through just networking, because I was trying to do a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely start up whatever you think you want to try. And then the other is, I got the YouTube channel, tons of videos. I talked to Morton in one of the episodes.
Yeah, totally.
And
let people know where to find you, of course.
Yeah. So if you're watching this, YouTube is the place to go. Since you like YouTube videos, check out the podcast. I know a lot of people are commuting, or you could do sort of other things while you're listening to the pod. A lot of the same content, typically about affiliate marketing, but I have been branching out into financial independence and personal finance, which at this point in time where the markets have dropped by I don't even know, 30%. It's either going to be more popular or a little less popular as people are freaking out about their accounts out there. But
yeah,
I haven't looked. My wife actually checked. She was like, I'm going to log in and see. And she was like, yeah, it was bad.
Okay.
So, yeah. And then the one last is Niche Site Project. That's where I blog. That's where I think the best content is. It's long form, and you can get those templates on the content and hiring all the stuff I mentioned before. So thanks a lot.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely put a link to all your sites and projects and channels in the description if you want to check that out. So totally gonna go and check out Doug's YouTube channel, and that I learned a ton from Doug over the years. It's many years since I saw you on YouTube for the first time. When did you start out on YouTube actually?
So technically, if you go way back, it's 2014, and
okay.
It was horrific, And then I think I did maybe 2 or 3 videos. And I really wanted to do more, and I wish I would have stuck with it back then, because I would be so much better than I am now. But in 2016, at the tail end of 2016, I started to get back into it, and then 2017, I hit it hard.
Okay, I think I met you before 16, so I probably saw some of that older content. But I think I was just consuming everything out there at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. They're rough. I mean, I left the videos out there, and you can see it's I'm scared to talk to the camera. And I literally, it would take me, 3 hours to do a 5-minute video.
Yeah. It's like a time capsule when you have a history on a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you for being on the YouTube channel here, and see you around, Doug.
All right. Thanks a lot. See ya.
See ya.